The sun is setting. Minho-chan walks calmly down the street. He enjoys the silence. There is almost no one around. Suddenly, he hears quick footsteps. A little girl runs out of the alley. She's crying. Her name is Lila Banks. She runs up to Minho in fear and grabs his hand. "Help!" she says, gasping for breath. "They've taken my mother. Some men are pushing her into a black car. They're taking her away." Minho looks at her frightened face. He sees she's telling the truth. He doesn't ask questions. He immediately takes out his phone. He dials a number. He speaks quietly, but clearly. All vehicles. Immediately. We're looking for a black car with a woman restrained against her will. 5-block radius. Priority number 1. He hangs up. His people are already in action. He looks at Lila. Now they need to move. Minho's quiet command works flawlessly. Dozens of cars begin moving throughout the neighborhood and then beyond. Taxi drivers, delivery men on scooters, men in casual wear in their cars, all receive a short message with a description. Minho's network, invisible to outsiders, springs into action. Information begins to flow to him instantly. One of his men, driving a coffee van, is the first to report. He saw a black sedan with tinted windows make a sharp turn toward an industrial area. This seems to be true. Meanwhile, Minho leads Lila to his car. It's a discreet but powerful SUV. He opens the back door. "Get in. You'll be safe here. We'll find your mother." His voice is no longer a command. It's even and calm. Lila silently climbs into the seat, clutching an old, battered backpack to her. Her trembling subsides a little, but her eyes are still wide with fear. Minho gets behind the wheel and starts the engine. He gives the coordinates to his driver in the lead car. They start driving, merging with traffic. He looks at the girl in the rearview mirror. "What's your name?" "Lila," she answers quietly. "I'm Minho." "Hold on, Lila. We're getting close." A few minutes later, the voice of his best tracker comes through Minho's earpiece. "Target detected." They're driving along Industrial Highway, heading for the old warehouses. 2 men in the car, a woman in the back seat. "Maintaining our distance." Minho changes route, following the directions. He sees 2 moving dots on the GPS screen. One is the target. The other is his men's car. They are traveling parallel, unnoticed. The kidnappers, feeling safe on the deserted road, are unaware that several cars are tailing them. Lila presses her face to the window, as if trying to spot that same black car in the twilight. Minho increases speed. Now the main thing is not to spook them. Wait for the right place. Minho speaks quietly and clearly into the microphone. His voice is calm, as if he's conducting an orchestra rather than preparing an operation. "Car 3, he addresses one of his drivers. "Overtake them on the parallel street and take up a position around the turnoff onto Skladoknaya. Keep your head down. Car 5, stay 300 meters behind the target. The rest of you, block the adjacent exits from the industrial zone. No sudden movements. Wait for them to stop." Everyone on the other end of the line briefly confirms. The plan is simple. Don't attack while moving, to avoid creating an emergency situation and putting the woman in unnecessary danger. We need to wait until they feel safe and stop. Then they'll be easy to surround. Minho keeps one eye on the GPS, where the dots of his men are beginning to gently shift, taking up positions. He himself is not driving a straight route, but in an arc to approach from the other side. Everything is calculated. Lila sits, quiet, watching Minho. She watches him speak into the microphone, his eyes flickering between the road and the screens. There's no panic or anger on his face, only a cool, collected concentration. He doesn't shout, doesn't fuss. Every word he says is a statement of fact, and judging by the short replies coming from the speaker, he's immediately understood and obeyed. This sight has a strange effect on her. Her own fear, a cold lump in her throat, begins to recede. It doesn't transform into fearlessness, but gives way to another feeling, wary hope. If this man were afraid, he'd be in a hurry, nervous, but he acts as if everything is already under control. Lila stops trembling. Her fingers release the death grip she's had on the hem of her jacket. She even tears herself away from the window and looks directly at the back of Minho's head, at his imperturbable posture. She doesn't understand anything about this man yet, but she's beginning to believe he knows what he's doing. The black sedan, meanwhile, leaves the city limits. The streetlights dwindle, the road narrows, fences topped with barbed wire, and the dark silhouettes of abandoned factories and hangars line the sides. The kidnappers are taking their prey to what they consider the ideal location, somewhere no one will hear their screams. They turn off the asphalt onto a rutted concrete road, leading to a long, low building with broken windows. It's an old warehouse complex. "They're turning into the Severny warehouse," comes the voice in Minho's earpiece. They're stopping at the main entrance. The target dot freezes on the GPS screen. Minho allows himself a slight, barely perceptible nod. This is even better than he expected. Abandoned territory, confined space, no bystanders. Excellent, he says into the microphone. Everyone in position. Lock down the gate. Capture team, stand by. We're waiting for my signal. He turns off the headlights himself and stops his car 200 meters from the entrance, behind a pile of rusty building structures. From here, the dark silhouette of the warehouse and a lone black sedan in front of it are visible. He turns to Lila. They've stopped. Your mother is in that building. My people will come in now and sort everything out. You'll stay here with me. Agreed? Lila, her eyes wide, looks at the moonlit warehouse and nods resolutely. She's no longer crying. She's waiting. Minho stares at the dark silhouette of the warehouse. The corners of his mouth twitch almost imperceptibly. This place is a gift. It's perfect for his actions. The area is surrounded by a high fence with a single gate, which is currently behind the black sedan. That means one checkpoint. No one will enter or leave without his permission. Its abandonment guarantees a privacy from prying eyes. The poor reception in this industrial area plays into his hands. The kidnappers won't be able to quickly call for backup. All that's required now is precision and speed. He assesses the distance, the location of the building's shadow, possible escape routes for the two inside. There are none. They've trapped themselves. He gives a final quiet command into the microphone. Gate team, now! The quiet sound of engines comes from where the two nondescript vans are parked. They emerge from around the corner of the neighboring hangar and take up a position across the road, directly in front of the warehouse's entrance gate. It happens in 10 seconds. A metallic thud. One of the men from the van quickly secures the chain to the gate, locking it from the inside. Now, all entry and exit to and from the premises is completely blocked. The black sedan is trapped in a space the size of a football field. The van's headlights are off, and the people inside don't emerge. They've simply created a barrier. Everything is still in near total silence. Meanwhile, another group had already approached the main building from different directions. 5 men in dark, unobstructed clothing. They moved from cover to cover, taking advantage of every shadow. 2 of the kidnappers had just led a woman out of the car. One held her hand, the other glanced around, but his gaze slid past the approaching shadows. A brief click in the team's headphones signaled the action. They sprang into action. The first man, the one looking back, didn't even have time to scream. 2 men approached him from behind. One grabbed him tightly, instantly throwing him off balance. The second placed a thick cloth with a pungent but subtle odor over his face. His body went limp in a second. The second kidnapper, hearing a rustle, turned and released the woman's hand. What? His words were cut off. Someone stepped hard on his knee from behind, forcing him to bend, and a gloved hand covered his mouth tightly. He saw the stranger's calm, expressionless face before him. Quiet! Came a voice right next to his ear. His hands were bound behind his back with a plastic zip tie. It all took less than 15 seconds. No gunshots, no loud screams, only the muffled sounds of a struggle, like the sound of wind through broken windows. The woman, Lila's mother, froze in place, her hands clasped to her throat. She looked at the strangers who had neutralized her captors, completely bewildered and afraid. She didn't understand who they were or what was happening. One of Minho's men gently but firmly took her elbow. It's okay. You're safe. Please, come this way. His voice was low and soothing, but it, too, held no room for discussion. He led her away from the immobilized and bound men, who were already being quickly and silently loaded into one of the vans that had pulled up right at the warehouse's porch. Raven Banks doesn't immediately understand what's happening. She's led out from the dark vaults of a warehouse into the chill night air. She instinctively raises her hand to shield herself from the unexpected glare of headlights. But the headlights are out. Quiet, focused people move around her. They don't pay much attention to her. Their task seems already accomplished. Her former captors, now bound and limp, disappear into the depths of the dark van. Shock grips her body, her thoughts jumbled. She looks at the man holding her elbow, firmly, but not harshly. It's over, he says simply, removing his hand once he's sure she can stand. Raven takes a step, then another. Her legs buckle, but she maintains her balance. She's dressed in a rumpled office suit, her hair untidy. She turns her head slowly, trying to take in the scene, the vans, the locked gates, and the calm efficiency with which everything was done. There's no relief in her eyes yet, only a deep, staggering confusion. While Raven regains consciousness, the action around her continues unabated. Minho's men work in unison. Without further ado, 2 men quickly and thoroughly search the black sedan, extracting keys, phones, and documents. Everything is placed in a separate opaque bag. Meanwhile, the van carrying the immobilized kidnappers is ready for departure. Its driver receives a curt nod from the team leader. They're going elsewhere. the leader says, and the van quietly moves off. It pulls up to the gate, where the men quickly remove the chain, let it through, and then lock the gate again. The car disappears into the night, heading in a completely different direction than its occupants expected. Silence reigns within, broken only by the steady hum of the engine. For the two men in the back seat, gradually regaining consciousness, their world has just shrunk to the size of this dark metal box, moving into the unknown. The van drives non-stop for about 40 minutes, leaving the industrial zone and entering an even more deserted area of old, partially abandoned dacha plots. It turns onto a dirt road and stops in front of a nondescript one-story sand-lime brick building. A former boiler house or pumping station. The garage door opens automatically, the van drives inside, and the gate closes. Only then does the light turn on, cold fluorescent lamps under the low ceiling. The men are led out of the van. The zip ties on their wrists are replaced with more substantial locks, chained to sturdy rings in the concrete floor of a small, clean, empty room. They are not physically harmed. They are even brought water in plastic bottles. The air inside is cool and smells of concrete and metal. One of Minho's men approaches them. His face expresses neither malice nor pleasure. It's completely neutral. Now you have time to think, he says evenly, to think about who you've decided to touch, about who gave you the task, and about what will happen next. You will be asked questions. Answer honestly. It's in your best interests. He turns and leaves, leaving them in the brightly lit silence. The click of the lock on the metal door seems deafening in this silence. Now they really do have time. Time to realize the scale of their mistake. Minho's method is not about brutality, but about absolute, overwhelming control. Fear of the unknown, of the cold calculation of this machine, is often far more effective. Raven is led to Minho's car. She walks unsteadily, as if she still can't believe she can move freely. Her gaze darts around until she finds familiar features in the SUV window, and then everything inside her breaks. Lila! The car door flies open, and the girl, beside herself, jumps out. A moment later, they are in each other's arms in the dark courtyard. Raven falls to her knees, holding her daughter tightly to her, burying her face in her hair. Her shoulders begin to shake violently. Quiet, intermittent sobs escape. These are no longer tears of terror, but tears of that sharp, painful relief that washes over you when a nightmare ends. Lila is crying too, clinging to her mother, clinging to her crumpled jacket. Mom, I was so scared. I know, baby. I know. It's okay. It's okay now, Raven whispers, although she still doesn't quite believe it. They sit like that, holding each other, surrounded by silently watching people in darkness. These moments of silent tears are more important than any words. This is the moment when fear finally subsides. A few minutes later, Raven stands up, still holding Lila's hand. She looks at Minho, who has tactfully stepped aside, giving them time. She approaches him. Her face is pale. There are shadows under her eyes, but her gaze is clearer now. She tries to straighten up, to gather the remnants of her dignity. I don't know who you are, she begins, and her voice trembles, but she forces herself to speak. I don't know why you did it, but you saved us. You saved my girl and me. Thank you. She lowers her head in a short, almost reflexive bow, full of sincerity and humility in the face of this unexpected rescue. I will never forget this. I have no words. Just thank you. She doesn't ask his name, doesn't ask what will happen to those people. Her gratitude in this moment is pure and simple. It is addressed to the man who appeared out of nowhere and stopped the fall into the abyss. Minho looks at them, at the exhausted but determined woman and the girl, who now clutches her mother's hand tightly, watching him with large, still wet eyes. He sees more than just gratitude. He sees a deep, ingrained fear that won't go away just by being saved. He sees vulnerability. These two are completely defenseless against the world right now. Whoever kidnapped Raven acted brazenly and right in front of her home. That means they don't fear the consequences. That means it could happen again. Gratitude isn't required, Minho says calmly, but your problem isn't solved. Those people knew where to find you. They might try again. Raven presses her lips together, her eyes filling with horror at this simple, terrible logic. She'd thought about it herself, but was afraid to admit it. I don't know where to go, she admits quietly. You're spending the night with me, Minho declares, not as a proposal, but as a statement of fact. His tone leaves no room for argument, but there's no threat in it, only practicality. This is a safe place. You can rest there, recuperate, and tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next. Get in the car, Lila, please. He opens the door for Raven, gesturing toward the back seat. Raven pauses for a second, looking at him, then at her daughter. She has no choice, and there's a strange comfort in his certainty. She nods, silently agreeing, and helps Lila inside before sitting down next to her. The door closes with a soft click, cutting them off from the cold night and the recent nightmare. Minho's car pulls away smoothly, followed by another, which follows discreetly behind them. The path now lies not into the unknown of fear, but into the unknown of temporary refuge. The car is silent, broken only by the soft hum of the engine. Raven sits, hugging Lila, pressed against her side. She looks out the dark window, but sees not the flickering lights of the city, but fragments of the horror she just endured. Her mind works feverishly, trying to find a way out, an alternative. But every thought hits a dead end. Home? It can no longer be considered safe. Friends? She doesn't want to and can't expose them to such danger. The police? The story would sound unbelievable, and most importantly, she no longer believes that it will stop her attackers. She feels Minho's calm, unobtrusive gaze on her in the rearview mirror. There is no pressure there, only anticipation, and in this silence, in this calm, she finds a strange confirmation of her only choice. She truly has no options. This stranger is the only support in a collapsed world. She does not utter words of agreement out loud. She simply stops, tensely straightening her back, allows herself to sink deeper into the seat, and her fingers, clutching Lila's shoulder, loosen slightly. That's the answer. Silent, tired acceptance. The car moves on, taking them away from the past, into a present full of uncertainty, but at least not danger. Minho's residence isn't located in the city center, but in a quiet, gated community. It's a modern house with clean geometric lines, large panoramic windows, and a minimalist facade. Inside, it's striking in its almost sterile cleanliness and order. Light walls, dark polished floors, minimal furniture, yet every detail feels expensive and thoughtfully crafted. There's nothing superfluous here, nothing cozy in the traditional sense, but a sense of absolute control and security. An elderly woman, with a gentle yet imperturbable face, the housekeeper, Myung-hee, greets them at the entrance. Without further ado, she leads Raven and Lila to a spacious guest room with its own bathroom. Clean, neutral clothes are already laid out there. Half an hour later, washed and changed, they descend to the dining room. A simple but filling meal is laid out on a long wooden table. Stewed vegetables, rice, steamed fish, and chicken soup. The aroma of food, ordinary and warm, feels real and comforting for the first time that day. Minho is already waiting for them. He, too, has changed into simple dark pants and a sweater. He gestures for them to sit. Dinner passes in silence, broken only by the clatter of cutlery. Lila, finally hungry, eats with gusto. Raven takes a few mechanical sips of soup. The very setting, this austere, almost impersonal luxury, makes her cringe inwardly, but at the same time makes it clear. Here, within these walls, they are in no danger. When the initial tension subsides a bit, and the plates are almost empty, Raven can't take it anymore. She puts down her spoon and looks at Minho across the table. The candles in the center cast a soft light on his impassive face. Mr. Chan, she begins carefully, using the last name she learned from the housekeeper. I don't want to seem ungrateful, but I don't understand. Why did you help us? Your people. They weren't the police. Minho slowly places his napkin next to his plate. His gaze meets hers. He takes his time answering. I saw a man in need and a child in despair, he says evenly. That was enough. My capabilities allow me to act quickly, but those men, the ones who took us, who took me, what will happen to them? Raven's voice sounds not only curious, but also afraid that their actions will spark a new wave of violence. They'll have a serious talk, Minho replies, his tone devoid of any threat, just a cold statement. They'll find out they made a mistake, and they'll tell you who gave them this task. This is important for your safety in the future. He pauses, letting her digest the information. You don't need to worry about that. Your task now is to rest and feel safe. The rest is my concern. His answers are simultaneously reassuring and alarming. They're too smooth, too confident. Raven realizes that behind this calm lies a whole world she knows nothing about. A world where a serious talk has a concrete, weighty meaning. She nods, hesitating to ask the next most important question. Who is he to wield such power? For now, it's enough for her that this power is currently on their side. Raven isn't satisfied with generalities. She pushes her cup away, her fingers trembling slightly. Promptly means they find a kidnapped person in a huge city within 10 minutes. Who has those resources? She tries to keep her voice from sounding suspicious, but rather trying to understand. She needs to know into whose hands her life and her daughters have fallen. Minho looks at her appraisingly. He sees not importunity, but intelligence and caution. Different areas of life require different tools, he says, avoiding a direct answer. Some have money, some have connections, some have information. I have all of these, enough to solve problems. Sometimes those problems are financial. Sometimes they're like yours. I help where I see injustice that affects the innocent. He pauses briefly. The motivation is simple. I prefer order to reign in my city. Chaos and lawlessness, like today, disrupt that order. So I eliminate them. He doesn't call himself a benefactor or a hero. He speaks like an engineer fixing a complex machine. His explanation sounds logical, even cold, and that somehow makes him more believable. He doesn't ask for gratitude, doesn't portray himself as a savior. He simply states a fact. He saw a glitch in the system and fixed it. Raven nods slowly. She doesn't fully understand, but she accepts these rules, as long as his rules work in her favor. The conversation trails off for a moment. Lila, exhausted from the stress, begins to nod off. Raven gently smooths her hair. It's over, sweetheart, she says quietly, more to reassure herself. No one will touch us again. But her own fear doesn't subside. She turns back to Minho, her face tense. What if he tries again? He has a lot of these people. He won't stop because of one failure. Minho tilts his head. He? Do you know who's behind this? Raven presses her lips together, hesitating. Saying that name out loud in this safe place feels dangerous, as if it might invite disaster. But she has to give him information to protect himself. Marcus, she breathes, and the word sounds like spit. Marcus Banks, my ex-husband. I'm almost certain this is his work. She doesn't look at Minho, staring at the table, so she doesn't see his immediate reaction. She simply continues, pouring out her pent-up bitterness. After the divorce, there were a lot of threats. He couldn't accept that I left and took Lila. But for this to happen, I never expected this from him. Silence hangs in the air, but its quality is changing. It's thick, electric. Raven feels it instinctively and looks up. Minho's face is frozen. All the neutral, reserved expressions he'd worn all evening are gone. His features haven't contorted with anger. They've simply transformed into a cold, polished mask. His gaze, once simply attentive, is now sharp and focused, as if he's seen not a name on the table but a complex chessboard, all the pieces suddenly falling into place. He doesn't move, but his stillness now conveys a colossal inner tension, a restrained power on full alert. Marcus Banks, he repeats. His voice isn't louder than before, but it has a new tone, low, metallic, devoid of any warmth. This is no longer the voice of a man making small talk. This is the voice of a man giving orders in a war zone. He slowly pushes his chair back and stands. His movements are still smooth, but they have acquired a precise, predatory economy. He walks to the window and turns his back, looking into the dark glass, but clearly seeing not the room's reflection, but something entirely different. This changes things, he finally says in the same cold, even tone, no longer addressing Raven so much as himself, comprehending this new fact. Your problem, Mrs. Banks, has just become significantly more complex, and more importantly, it now directly concerns me. He turns. His eyes meet hers, filled with confusion. There is no longer even a hint of simple human sympathy in them. Now there is only calculation and an icy, merciless clarity. The world in this dining room has been turned upside down by the utterance of a single name. Minho returns to the table, but doesn't sit. He stands with his palms on the back of his chair, his gaze fixed on Raven. Marcus Banks isn't just your ex-husband, he says, every syllable of his voice like a coin. He's my competitor, or rather, one of those trying to do business on my turf without following the established rules. He and I have a long history of disagreements. He doesn't go into detail, but the way he says disagreements makes it clear. This rivalry goes far beyond simple business competition. It's a feud built on mutual disrespect and possibly blows throne. He's a man without principles, Minho continues. He sees people only as tools or obstacles. The fact that he's chosen to act against you in this way, that's unfortunately just like him. But this isn't just your problem anymore. His words ring with more than just sympathy. It's a cold statement of fact. The lines of their personal wars have just crossed. Raven and Lila have gone from being random victims to pawns, and perhaps even key pieces, on this hidden chessboard. Raven listens, her fear slowly giving way to bitter understanding. She nods, clasping her hands in her lap. He doesn't just want to intimidate me, she says quietly. He wants back what I took with me in the divorce. I didn't give him one box of documents. He thought I didn't know about it, or didn't understand its significance. She pauses, collecting her thoughts. Lila, quiet, looks carefully between her mother and Minho, sensing the tension. Those weren't our personal papers. They were business records. Contracts, numbers, everything he kept in his home office, thinking it was safe. I found them by accident, back when we were together. Saw things I didn't like. After the divorce, I took that box. At first, as a guarantee that he would leave us alone, Then, I just hid it. She looks up at Minho, and her eyes are defiant. He said he destroyed everything, but I knew he was lying. He never throws anything away. These papers are his weak spot. Minho freezes. His analytical mind, just reconfigured for the new threat configuration, now instantly switches to assessing the new asset. These documents, he says slowly, do they contain information about his illegal operations, schemes, partners, movement of funds? Raven nods. Yes. There are records of transfers to accounts that shouldn't have existed, contracts with shell companies, correspondence, where he directly specifies how to circumvent certain rules. I'm not an accountant or a lawyer, but even I understood that this wasn't just business. This is evidence. A heavy, meaningful silence hangs in the air. Saving a woman and child out of compassion unexpectedly turned into an opportunity to deal a crushing blow to a sworn enemy. These papers are more than just dirt. They are the key to Marcus Banks's systems. With their help, they could not only harm him, but dismantle his empire piece by piece, exposing every weak point and handing him over to justice, or, more likely in their world, to other, even more ruthless players. Where are they now? Minho asks, his voice once again taking on a businesslike, operational tone. All personal details are discarded. In a safe deposit box in a bank account that is registered only to me, Raven answers. He searched the house, tried to intimidate me, but he never found it. Now, after today, I think he decided to act harshly, to beat information out of me. Minho nods slowly. The picture is complete. These papers, he says, have changed your position. They have turned you from a victim into a dangerous witness. And now, his gaze becomes piercing. They make you my natural ally. Raven sighs heavily, her gaze dropping to her sleeping daughter, and she speaks more quietly, as if afraid to wake her even with this confession. Today's kidnapping isn't his first move. For the last 6 months, it's been constant pressure, anonymous calls with no answer. A car that drove slowly past our house in the evening for several days in a row. One time, I found the door to the apartment slightly ajar, although I clearly remembered locking it. Nothing was missing, but it felt like everything had been ransacked. She hugs herself, as if from the cold. I went to the police. They took statements, said, we'll run an investigation, but the calls kept coming. I changed my numbers. They found new ones. I realized he was demonstrating his power, showing that he could reach us at any moment. His goal wasn't just to scare us. He wanted me, broken, to bring him these papers and beg for mercy. And today his patience ran out. Minho listens without interrupting. His face remains inscrutable, but his eyes flash with a quick, calculating understanding. When Raven falls silent, he speaks calmly and very clearly. A safe deposit box is a good place, but not a perfect one. It protects against theft, but not against coercion. Now that he's realized that gentle pressure doesn't work, he will act more forcefully. Your safety and Lila's safety directly depend on the location of these documents. He pauses, letting this simple truth sink in. I suggest we move the box here. I have a vault in my residence that's as good as a bank's, and its location is known only to me and 2 of my most trusted men. This will remove the targeting. Marcus will know he no longer has the papers, and his motivation to pursue you personally will be greatly weakened. He'll have to deal with me now. His proposal doesn't sound like a request or a demand, but rather like the only logical next step in the current strategic situation. He doesn't ask her consent to use the documents, only to move them to a safe location. He assumes the role of custodian, lifting this dangerous burden from her shoulders. Raven looks at him for a long moment. Images flash through her mind, the fear of the past months, the horror of today, her daughter's vulnerability, and then Minho's cold confidence, the speed and efficiency of his men. He suggests simply hiding the papers, but will that solve the problem? Marcus won't stop. He'll find a new way to hurt her, even if the documents are safe, and then a solution is born within her. Not out of revenge, although there is that, but out of a desire to finally end this, to protect Lila once and for all. No, she says quietly but firmly. Minho raises an eyebrow slightly, but remains silent. Simply hiding them means living in anticipation of his next strike. He won't leave us alone, even if you have the papers. He'll try to get to you to take them, or he'll simply continue to take revenge on us out of spite. She straightens up, and a steeliness appears in her voice that wasn't there before. I'm suggesting you don't just keep them. I'm suggesting you use them. All the information that's there. Use it against him. Stop him. She looks him straight in the eye. You said he's your adversary. These documents are a weapon. I'm handing you this weapon, not so you can simply hide it in a safe, but so you can use it, so that he'll never again have the opportunity to raise a hand against us or ruin anyone else's lives. Silence falls in the room. Ray has just crossed the line from supplicant to ally, offering not just shelter, but joint action. She's giving him her only trump card, but she's doing it not as a victim, but as a strategist who understands the value of this move. Minho doesn't answer right away. He studies Raven's face, seeing not a burst of despair, but a cold, hard-won determination. He nods, once, short and clear. You're right, he says. Passive defense will only delay the conflict. The threat must be eliminated at its source. He moves away from the table and looks out the window again, but now his posture is that of a commander, assessing a map. These documents change the balance of power. Until now, our disagreement with Marcus has been a stalemate. Each of us had our own leverage, our own protected positions. This information is the key to his strongholds. He turns to her. I accept your offer, but there are conditions. You remain here, under my protection, for the duration of the action. You grant me full access to the documents and provide clarifications where necessary. In exchange, I guarantee that Marcus Banks will never again be able to harm you or your daughter. His influence will be neutralized. His words sound like the terms of a contract. There's no pathos in them, only mutually beneficial obligations. I agree, Raven answers immediately. For her, this isn't a choice, but a necessity. I'll do whatever it takes. I want this to end. Then we act as partners, Minho concludes. Tomorrow morning, we will retrieve the documents from the lockbox. My people will organize everything. You will only need to grant access and identify the box. And after that, we will begin the analysis. For a moment, something vaguely resembling respect appears in his eyes. That's a bold move, Mrs. Banks. Not many in your place would dare to take it. It's not courage, Mr. Chang, Raven corrects him quietly, looking at the sleeping Lila. It's the lack of other options, and the trust you have already earned today. An alliance is formed. The common goal is clear, not just to survive, but to neutralize the threat. From a chance rescuer and the rescued, they transform into allies, bound by a shared animosity and a common interest. The room, recently a temporary refuge, now becomes the headquarters for planning the operation. The next morning, everything happens with the same efficient silence as the day before. Raven, after a nearly sleepless night, but with a new sense of purpose, rises early. They bring her simple, comfortable clothes. Over breakfast, Minho gives her a brief briefing. 2 of my men will go with you. They know what to do. You only need to be present when the safe deposit box is opened, check the integrity of the contents, and hand it over to them. The rest is their responsibility. You will go to the bank in one car and return in another, on along a different route. Questions? Raven shakes her head. Her heart is pounding, but her mind is calm. She understands the importance of every step. No, I'm ready. Half an hour later, she gets into a black sedan with tinted windows. At the wheel is the same imperturbable driver from the day before. Next to him is a man in a business suit who introduces himself as Kim. He is polite, laconic. Silence reigns in the cabin. The car moves slowly, merging with the flow of traffic. Ray notices that they are accompanied by another car, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, changing lanes. She realizes it's a cover. The bank is a large, reputable institution in the city center. The car stops not at the main entrance, but at a side service entrance. Kim gets out first and opens the door for Ray. They enter not through the main hall, but through a separate corridor where a bank employee with an impassive face is already waiting for them. No unnecessary words. They are shown to the room where the safety deposit boxes are handled. The procedure takes minutes. Ray, his hands shaking slightly, inserts the key and enters the code. The metal door of the safety deposit box opens. Inside lies an inconspicuous cardboard box from office papers, tied with twine. It looks so ordinary that no one would guess that inside is a weapon capable of ruining someone's life. Everything okay? Kim asks quietly. Yes, Ray breathes out. That's her. Kim nods. He takes a sturdy black rolling case out of his briefcase and opens it. Inside is a soft cushion material. He carefully, leisurely, transfers the box into the case, closes it, and the combination locks click. The entire process takes less than a minute. Done, he says. They leave the bank along the same deserted corridor, but at the exit, another car is waiting for them, a gray, nondescript minivan. Ray and Kim quickly get into it. The first sedan drives off calmly, merging with traffic. The minivan starts in the opposite direction. The route winds, changing several times. Ray loses his bearings. Kim stares silently at her tablet the entire time, tracking something. 40 minutes later, they pull into the underground garage of a building she knows. The garage door closes behind them. Only then does Ray allow herself to take a deep breath. The briefcase is unloaded and wheeled in the freight elevator straight to Minho's office. He's already waiting. The office is as minimalist as the rest of the house. A large desk, several monitors, and built-in cabinets. Kim places the briefcase on the desk, unlatches the door and opens it. The cardboard box lies untouched inside. The operation went smoothly. Kim reports. Good, Minho says. He looks at Raven. Thank you. The documents are now safe. You've done your part. He approaches the wall and presses a barely noticeable button. A section of the wall panel silently slides aside, revealing an entrance to a small, brightly lit room, a storage facility. Shelves filled with folders and digital archives are visible inside. He carries the box inside himself and places it on a separate shelf. The door closes, blending into the wall. The documents are now in the most secure place in his empire. Stage 1 completed. Now begins the phase of analysis, planning, and, ultimately, counterattack. Raven looks at the hidden door. Fear still lingers somewhere deep within, but it's already being overcome by a new feeling. Anticipation of the end of a long nightmare. The weapon is drawn and loaded. Now it's up to who will take aim. Minho's office is plunged into a concentrated silence, broken only by the rustling of papers and the soft clicking of a computer mouse. The only other person in the room is his advisor, a man in his 50s with a sharp, ascetic face and intent eyes, behind thin-rimmed glasses. His name is Park, and he has a talent for finding order in the most chaotic jumble of data. The box sits on the table, the string carefully untied. Minho and Park work wearing thin cotton gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints and damaging the old sheets. They work methodically like archivists, but with a completely different goal. Each document is photographed at high resolution, after which the original is placed in a transparent file, and the digital copy is immediately uploaded to a secure database. The first half hour is spent on simple organization. Contracts are filed with each other, financial reports are filed with each other, and personal correspondence is kept separate. Raven sits in a chair a little to the side, ready to answer questions, but for now, she's undisturbed. She watches as the two men, barely speaking, understand each other with half a word and a gesture. It's a well-oiled machine. Puck is the first to find the key. He pauses over a printout of bank transfers dating back 3 years, his finger lingering on a chain of 4 accounts in different jurisdictions. Here, he says quietly, not taking his eyes off the page. A classic cash-out scheme, but with a mistake. He used a shell company, which also appears in a supply contract from. His hands leaf through the folders, finding another document. Yes, from Scion Industries. It's a company we've been tracking for a long time. Minho approaches, looking over his shoulder. A shadow of cold satisfaction crosses his face. A connection, he states. Proven ties between Marcus and the smugglers. This isn't just tax fraud anymore. Continue. The work continues. With each passing hour, the picture becomes clearer. The documents Raven intuitively saved turn out to be a veritable treasure trove of incriminating evidence. It's not just financial fraud. There are records of agreements with city officials, with specific amounts and names listed. There are drafts of threats against former partners, apparently scribbled in a fit of anger by Marcus himself on company letterhead. There are lists of monthly security expenses, essentially retribution for patronage. Look, Puck places 2 documents next to each other. A contract for an inflated amount with a certain company, and a month later, a statement of purchase of real estate in the Caribbean in the name of a woman listed as a secretary at that company. An indirect but obvious kickback scheme. He had a habit of keeping everything, Minho says thoughtfully. Ambition and vanity. He thought these papers were proof of his strength, his archives, but they became proof of his madness. By evening, they have a clear plan of action. It consists of several stages, like carefully lined up dominoes. First, says Park, leaning back in his chair, an anonymous leak to the tax service about these transfer schemes. This will trigger an audit and a freeze on the accounts. Fuss and attention. Second, continues Minho, copies of the contracts with officials are sent to their immediate superiors and to an influential but very cautious publication, not for publication, but for informational purposes. This will create pressure from within the system. His roof will begin to crack. Third, Park points to the list of shell companies. We pass on the information to our partners in the industry who suffered from Marcus's actions. Specifically, about his attempts to intercept cargo at the port last year. They will know what to do. It's an economic and reputational blow. And finally, fourth, Minho's voice is quieter but firmer. We'll use the most personal information, threats, surveillance records, anything directly related to Mrs. Banks. This will form the basis for an official statement and a request for permanent police protection. But only after the first 3 steps have weakened him to the limit. He'll be fighting for survival on all fronts and will have no resources left for revenge. The plan doesn't involve direct physical confrontation. It's subtler and more brutal. It's aimed at dismantling Marcus Bankston Empire brick by brick, stripping him of his money, influence, and patrons, leaving him with nothing. This isn't just punishment, it's a demonstration. Anyone who touches people under Minho's protection loses everything. Minho looks at Raven. Are you sure of your decision? Once you take the first step, there's no turning back. He'll realize the information has leaked from you. Raven, who had been listening silently this entire time, looking at the evidence of her ex-husband's power and fall laid out on the table, nods firmly. I'm sure. Let him lose everything. That will be fair. Meanwhile, in another wing of the residence, a new, strange, but sturdy security regime began to take shape for Lila and Raven. The first 2 days were filled with residual tremors and flinches at every unfamiliar sound, but gradually, subconsciously, the feeling of constant threat began to recede, dissolving into the secure walls and clear routine. Lila was the first to adapt. Her childish psyche, flexible and resilient, gravitated toward stability. She was assigned a room next to her mother's. At first, she was afraid to be alone, but the housekeeper, Myung-hee, a woman with warm, kind hands and a calm voice, brought her several books, a drawing set, and a soft teddy bear, who was also looking for a place to settle. Myung-hee didn't ask unnecessary questions, simply creating an island of quiet normality around the girl. By the third day, Lila was already eating breakfast in the dining room, boldly asking for more rice, and smiling shyly at Minho when he passed by. Raven had it tougher. Years of living on edge, waiting for a blow from around the corner, don't pass in a matter of days. She woke at night, listening. But now she heard not the suspicious silence, but the guard's measured footsteps in the hallway, the soft hum of an alarm, and once, the soothing sound of piano music coming from Minho's office late at night. These were the sounds of protection, not a threat. Minho didn't force himself on them, but he didn't hide either. They occasionally ran into each other over breakfast or dinner. At first, the conversations were extremely cautious, about neutral things, the weather, whether Lila liked the soup, but gradually, as the paperwork progressed, Minho began sharing the general results with Raven, without going into detail, but making it clear that the process was underway. We've found several promising directions, he said one morning, looking through his tablet. Your documents turned out to be even more valuable than we imagined. He kept everything, Raven replied with a bitter smile. All his victories. Now they'll turn against him. Exactly, Minho agreed, and something akin to approval flickered in his eyes. A kind of mutual respect developed between them. He saw her not simply as a victim, but as an ally who had shown courage. She saw him not as an abstract force, but as someone who kept his word and acted according to a clear plan. He provided security and resources. She provided a key weapon and the moral authority to use it. It was a strong, businesslike alliance based on shared interests. For Lila, Minho gradually ceased to be just that man who helped. He became a constant, inexplicable, yet reliable part of her new world, like a rock against which the waves crash. One day, as he passed the living room where she was drawing, she suddenly asked, Mr. Chan, will the bad people not come anymore? He paused, thought, and answered with unusual directness, looking at her, as long as you're here, they won't come. I'll make it so they can never come, I promise. And she believed him. Children sense falsehood, and there was none in his words, just the fact. Raven, watching her daughter laugh loudly, and without looking back, felt the frozen spots in her own soul thaw. For the first time in years, she slept deeply, not waking at every rustle. She could shower without listening to the sounds in the apartment. She could simply sit with a cup of tea by the huge window, looking out onto the garden, and not automatically scan the street for threats. It wasn't just the absence of danger. It was the presence of safety, strong, silent, but absolute. They didn't become a family. There wasn't a hint of sentimentality, but they became something else. A strong, united alliance. Raven and Lila found in Minho and his organization not a temporary refuge, but a powerful shield. And Minho found in them not a burden, but moral capital and living proof of his enemy's dishonor. Their new alliance was quiet, devoid of grandiose words, but all the stronger for it. They were on the same side of the barricade, and this barricade finally seemed impenetrable. Work in Minho's office began to boil with renewed intensity. This was no longer just an analysis, but a task force. The plan he and Park had developed was being executed with flawless synchronicity. The first stage was a financial attack. Anonymous but incredibly detailed packages of documents were prepared for the tax service. They were devoid of emotion, only facts, figures, and chains of transfers, clearly indicating fraud on a large scale. They were sent not from a single source, but from several different points across the city through secure channels to create the impression that the information was emerging independently from various informants. The reaction, as expected, was swift. 2 days later, the accounts of Marcus Banks and his main companies were frozen, pending clarification. This was the first tangible blow. Marcus's world, built on money and its free movement, began to show its first cracks. The second stage was more subtle. Copies of incriminating documents linking Marcus to the officials were delivered to the recipients, not as blackmail, but as a warning from a friendly party. Unaddressed envelopes appeared on the desks of these officials' immediate superiors, as well as several influential people in the mayor's office, known for their intolerance to corruption. No demands were made, just information. That was enough. The following week, two of the officials in question suddenly took extended leave for health reasons. A third was urgently transferred to another, less significant position. Marcus's roof didn't collapse, but repairs stopped. His calls went unanswered. The third stage required outside intervention. Minho personally, through trusted intermediaries, contacted representatives of another organization whose interests Marcus had grossly violated a year earlier by attempting to intercept a sea cargo. They were given only the most compelling documents, irrefutable evidence that Marcus was behind the audacious operation that had cost them millions. The information was given without strings attached. As a sign of respect and mutual interest, the intermediary said, the response came in the form of action. 3 of Marcus's key warehouses, through which his legitimate and not so legitimate goods were transported, were blocked due to surprise inspections by fire and sanitation authorities. His trucks began to be detained on the highways with suspicious frequency. Economic pressure began to mount rapidly. Raven watched from the sidelines. Minho regularly, succinctly, updated her on their progress. She watched as her own fear gradually gave way to cold satisfaction. Each report was another brick pulled from the wall of her personal prison. Lila, shielded from these details, simply flourished in safety. She became friends with the Myung-hee and began studying with interest with the visiting teacher Minho had arranged to keep her on track. Her drawings appeared on the refrigerator, and her laughter echoed in the hallways. One evening, after Minho reported the successful blockade of Marcus's second-largest warehouse, Raven lingered in the office after delivering her report. "Thank you," she said simply, looking at him, "not just for doing this, but for keeping me informed. For not hiding me in a dark room while the adults dealt with the problem." Minho put the tablet down. "You started this, Mrs. Banks. You handed over the weapon. You have the right to see it used. Besides," he paused, "this is your life, your liberation. You should see it coming." She nodded. An awkward but warm silence hung in the air. "Lila, she's asking if we'll live here forever," Raven said carefully. "I don't know what to tell her." Minho looked out the window at the dark, illuminated garden. "You are safe here. Until the threat is completely eliminated, this is your home, and then decide for yourself. The doors from here can lead anywhere." This was more than she expected to hear. Not possessiveness, but the provision of choice, the possibility of a future she hadn't had a month ago. Meanwhile, chaos reigned in Marcus Banks's camp. He rushed between his deserted offices, trying to pressure some, buy others, threaten others. But his calls were ignored. His money was unavailable. His threats now rang hollow. He felt the ground shifting beneath his feet, but he couldn't understand the source of the attack. He suspected his ex-wife, but he couldn't believe she had the intelligence and connections to mount such a sophisticated attack. His men, the very ones taken captive by Minho's men, never returned. Their silence spoke louder than words. Panic, cold and clammy, began to creep up on him. Minho knew about his condition. His network of informants worked flawlessly. He received reports on Marcus's every move, every outburst of rage, every desperate call. It was all part of the plan, not just to defeat him, but to demoralize him, so that when the time came for the final step, there would be no resistance. The final step was now being prepared. Pack was gathering the final batch of documents, the ones directly related to the stalking of Raven and Lila. Call records, partially recovered through phone company connections, reports from private investigators hired by Marcus for surveillance, and most importantly, confessions from those same kidnappers who were still reflecting on their behavior in an isolated room. They had been professionally interrogated, obtaining clear, detailed statements about who hired them and what they were ordered to do. This was direct evidence for law enforcement. "Tomorrow," Minho said that evening, when Park had finished compiling the final dossier, "we'll hand it over to the officials, not anonymously, through my lawyers with media attention. This won't be an undermining, but a direct assault. After that, he won't have time for revenge. He'll have to flee criminal prosecution." Raven, who had been present at this conversation, asked, "What will happen to him? To prison?" Minho shrugged. "Perhaps, but more likely, he'll try to escape while he can. Disappear. That will be the best outcome for both of us. Prison leaves room for revenge. Oblivion, no." She understood. They weren't just punishing him. They were erasing him from their reality, crossing him out as a mistake. Before bed, Raven went into Lila's room. The girl was asleep, hugging that same teddy bear tightly. Raven adjusted the blanket, looking at her calm face. Soon, Very soon, they would be able to leave this house, not as fugitives, but simply as people walking down the street. They would be able to return to life, not the old fearful one, but a new one they had yet to build. And strangely enough, they had a powerful ally. In his room, Minho stood by the window, looking out over the city at night. Tomorrow would bring an end to this long standoff. He wasn't thinking about Marcus. He was already a done deal. He was thinking about the two uninvited guests who had barged into his life, and against all logic, strengthened his position. He had given them protection, and they had given him legal authority and a powerful weapon to strike. It was a strange but effective alliance. Preparations were complete. All the pieces were in place. Tomorrow, the final phase of the operation would begin. Quiet, without a single shot fired, but irrevocable. For Raven and Lila, the world was finally about to cease being a battlefield. And for Marcus Banks, it was about to cease being a world altogether. The night before the final act was a tense one, but for different reasons for everyone involved. Minho's residence was a quiet, focused affair. Park spent the night reviewing the final documents for the final dossier. Every page, every figure, every confession had to be flawless. Minho's lawyers, cold, expensive specialists, familiar with every legal loophole, had already been notified of a meeting the following morning. They would be the legal weapons that would transform the collected evidence into a formal indictment. Minho personally verified the security of all digital copies and physical originals. He left no room for error or leakage. This strike had to be precise and fatal to the reputation and freedom of Marcus Banks. Raven couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in her bed, listening to the quiet but confident sounds of the house. The footsteps of the guards, the click of the lock in the office, the distant beep of the elevator. These were sounds of power, but today they didn't calm, they stirred. Tomorrow, everything would end, or begin anew. Her thoughts revolved around the future. Where would they live? Would she ever feel normal again in her old apartment, where every corner was a reminder of fear? What would she say to Lila? The girl had already become accustomed to this strange but secure castle. Disrupting this new stability was terrifying, but staying here forever, that wasn't a solution either. She owed Minho her life and safety, but she didn't want to become an eternal dependent. This internal struggle between gratitude and the desire for independence haunted her. She stood and tiptoed into the living room adjacent to her bedroom. A large picture window offered a view of the sleeping city, dotted with lights. Here, in the silence and darkness, she tried to imagine herself down there, among those lights, free. Can't sleep? A quiet voice made her jump. Minho stood in the doorway of his office, illuminated by a strip of light from behind him. He was wearing no jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up. Yes, she admitted. I'm thinking about tomorrow, and the day after. He entered the living room but kept his distance, leaning against the doorframe. That's natural. Tomorrow we will deal the final blow. After that, his influence will be reduced to zero, and you and Lila will receive official protected person status. The police will be obliged to respond to any threat against you. Legally, you will be under complete protection. And unofficially? Raven asked, turning to him. He could still hire someone out of desperation, like those two. Minho nodded. Unofficially, my people will keep an eye on you for as long as it takes. Not closely, but you will know they are nearby, until I am 100% sure that he no longer poses a threat. That may take time. His words were reassuring, but a reminder that the world outside the walls of this house had not changed. Only her position within it had. And you? She asked unexpectedly. It's a risk for you, too. Now he knows you're behind all of this. He'll take revenge on you. A shadow of something vaguely resembling a smile flickered on Minho's lips, but without the warmth. Raven, he said, using her name informally for the first time. He was my opponent long before you arrived. This story merely gave me a legitimate pretext and irrefutable means to end a long-standing dispute. Revenge? He won't have the resources left for that. His own world will collapse around him tomorrow morning, and those who once feared or respected him will turn their backs. In our world, without power and money, a person ceases to exist. He'll become a ghost. He spoke of this with such chilling certainty that a shiver ran down Raven's spine. It wasn't bragging, but a statement of fact. Minho wasn't simply punishing an enemy. He was erasing him from reality, turning him into a non-human. And this had its own special, frightening kind of justice. And we, Lila and I, after all this, we owe you, she blurted out, before she could think about the question. Minho frowned, genuinely surprised. Oh, no. The alliance was mutually beneficial. You provided key information. I provided protection and implementation. The debt is paid. After tomorrow, you are free. You can return to your life, to your work. Of course. With a new security system, he added dryly. Raven felt a weight lift from her soul, but in its place, a new strange emptiness arose. Freedom. She had been waiting for it for so long, and now she was afraid of it. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome, he answered just as quietly. Now try to get some sleep. Tomorrow is an important day. He nodded and disappeared into the light of his office, closing the door. Meanwhile, in a penthouse across town, Marcus Banks paced like a wounded animal. His once pristine office was littered with papers, and empty bottles of expensive whiskey littered the floor. He'd just been turned down again. His latest attempt to withdraw a large sum through an old, corrupt contact had failed. The man on the other end of the line, always so helpful, was now speaking in a clipped, nervous voice. I can't, Marcus. Now's not the time. I'm in the middle of audits. Later, maybe. And he hung up. Later, maybe. It was the death knell. His phone was ringing off the hook. Anxious, angry, frightened, deed. Partners were demanding explanations for frozen accounts. Lawyers were reporting new inquiries from the prosecutor's office. The head of security reported that 2 more guards had quit, taking their belongings. A bad sign. The rats were fleeing a sinking ship, and that ship was his life. He walked to the window, clutching the whiskey in his glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. The city below shone, indifferent to his agony. Who was behind this? Who could have struck such a precise, multifaceted blow? At first, he blamed his competitors, but that wasn't their style. It was too pure, too legal, and too personal. The thought of Raven surfaced again, but he pushed it aside. No, she didn't have such opportunities, so she had a patron, a powerful patron. The name came to him on its own. Cold and clear, like a knife thrust, Minho-chan, their long-standing, smoldering feud, the one who always stood for his rules, who looked upon him with disdain. That was his style, not a shootout on the outskirts, but a quiet strangulation with papers and rules. Using his own documents against him, yes, that would be Chan's exquisite revenge. Rage gave way to a chilling fear. If it was Chang, and if he had those papers, then the game really was over. Marcus sank into his chair, suddenly feeling the full weight of impending disaster. He was trapped. Financially, legally, reputationally. Run? His accounts were frozen. They were probably already watching him. Stay? That meant arrest, trial, disgrace. For the first time in years, Marcus Banks felt utterly helpless. The next morning, the atmosphere at Minho's residence was businesslike. Raven dressed in the formal suit provided for her. She was to attend a meeting with her lawyers to give her testimony. Lila was left in Myung-hee's care, with the promise that it would be short-lived. 3 lawyers and Park gathered in the large conference room. Minho gave a brief summary. The lawyers, expressionless men, studied the file. Their questions to Raven were precise, without emotion. They elicited dates, context, her understanding of the documents. It felt more like an interrogation, but Raven understood its necessity. Her words were to form the basis of an official statement. That's enough, the senior lawyer, a man with graying temples and a sharp gaze, finally declared. We have grounds to file a complaint with the prosecutor's office for extortion, kidnapping, death threats, and financial fraud on the part of Marcus Banks. We will also pass copies on to the Financial Intelligence Service and several interested media outlets. The wave will be high. The plan was simple and effective. An official statement launches a criminal case. A leak to the press creates a public outcry that will not allow the case to be hushed up. The financial information will finally destroy his business reputation. When? Asked Minho. This afternoon. All the documents have already been prepared, Mrs. Banks will sign the statement now, and the process will be launched. Raven picked up a pen. The sheet of paper in front of her seemed incredibly heavy. Her signature was the final stroke that set off the avalanche. She paused for a second, then clearly wrote her name. The act is complete. Now she is not just a victim, but a plaintiff. After the lawyers left, Puck turned on the large screen. It showed a map of the city with several markers. Our people report that Marcus Banks left his penthouse half an hour ago, Puck said. He's heading to the port, to the private dock where his yacht is moored. It looks like he's trying to escape. Minho didn't look surprised. Predictable? Alert the Coast Guard? He asked, but his voice was hesitant. That would cause an official uproar. Perhaps there's an easier way, Park said, exchanging a meaningful glance with Minho. Minho thought for a moment, then nodded. Yes, let him try. And let him fail. On our territory, unnoticed. Contact the caretaker at the port. Make sure the yacht doesn't sail anywhere today. For technical reasons, Park immediately began dialing. Raven watched, understanding that another act of this drama was unfolding, invisible to prying eyes. Minho wasn't simply handing the case over to the authorities. He was ensuring that Marcus didn't escape before justice and public opinion caught up with him. The evening news that day was explosive. Crisis in the bank's empire. Major businessman suspected of kidnapping his ex-wife. Marcus Banks' Ponzi scheme. The headlines blared across every channel. They showed footage of locked warehouses, worried investors, and graphs of his collapsing assets. Marcus's face, once confident and arrogant, now flickered in old archive photos, distorted with anger. At the Minho residence, everyone gathered around the large television in the living room. Lila, not understanding the full depth of what was happening but sensing the gravity of the moment, fell silent next to her mother. Raven squeezed her hand, watching the screen. She had witnessed the collapse of the man who had terrorized her for years. There was no joy. There was a cold, silent exhalation. The end. Minho stood to the side, watching Raven's reaction. His task was complete. Late that evening, the last message from Park arrived, short and to the point. The yacht never left, detained for an unscheduled customs check as it left the waters. Banks has returned to the city, location known, awaiting a call from his last lawyer, who, according to our information, is preparing surrender terms for him. Marcus was in a cage. Legal, financial, physical. He couldn't escape. Staying meant certain arrest in the morning. He had no moves left. Minho approached Raven. "It's over. He'll be arrested tomorrow morning. He won't have the time or the means to organize anything against you. You're free." Raven looked at him, then at Lila, who, tired from the day's excitement, had fallen asleep in her lap. "What now?" she asked quietly. "You live now," Minho answered simply. "You can stay here until you find a new place to live, if your old one brings back unpleasant memories. My people will help with security at the new place. You can go back to work. Lila can go back to school. Life goes on, only without fear." He paused. "And if he ever gets out, and if he ever has thoughts of revenge, he will deal with me. I give you this word." It was enough. More than enough. Raven stood up, careful not to wake her daughter. "Thank you, Minho, for everything." "Sleep well, Raven," he said. And for the first time there was a softness in his voice, an almost human warmth. Tomorrow is a new day. And as Raven tucked Lila into bed, adjusting the blanket around her chin, for the first time in many, many years, she felt not just relief, but a quiet, deep hope. The nightmare was over, not because the knights had saved her, but because she had found the strength to hand over the weapon and unite with the one who could wield it. They had broken the system of fear, using its own rules against her. Outside the window, the city shone peacefully, her city, now hers again. And somewhere deep within it, in an expensive but suddenly cramped hotel room, her ex-husband, defeated and despairing, looked upon that same city and understood that for him it no longer existed. Minyo-chan's preparations had culminated in complete and utter victory, and the silence that fell in the residence was the silence, not before a storm, but after it, peaceful, profound, and well-earned.